What's going on, everybody? It is that time again. The Sooners Illustrated Podcast, episode 121.
121.
It's Monday, October 21st, 2024. Josh Callaway, James D. Jackson, Tom Green with you on a post-game reaction Monday. Oklahoma got blown out again. It was very ugly on Saturday. They lost South Carolina by 26 points at the stadium. We were all there. We're going to talk about it. Of course, they subsequently fired offensive coordinator Seth Littrell. We had our instant reaction show Sunday night. We'll talk about that a little bit more. We got to let it wash over us. We slept on it. We'll get into that a little bit further on the show as well. Typical Monday post-game reaction with a little extra, as a lot has happened between now and when that game happened on Saturday. But, guys, we'll go ahead and get into it. Horrible game. Oklahoma lost by 26 at home. Statistically, it's one of those things where you just look at the box score. Oklahoma actually outgained South Carolina in this game. Defense played pretty well, but the 3 turnovers start the game. It was over right there. Michael Hawkins got benched and went back to Jackson Arnold. One of the more embarrassing home losses in a long time. It was their biggest halftime deficit since the 90s. It was rough, guys. Rough. And we'll get into all the angles like we always do. But just in general, this was as bad of a loss as OU has had in quite a while. To lose by 26 at home to South Carolina. I know I called them a middle-of-the-road SEC team on the instant reaction. South Carolina fans felt a certain way about that. They are. They're in 11th place in the SEC. Like, what are we doing here? They're not a bad team. Those are different things. They're a perfectly solid team. But as far as relative to the rest of the conference, they are middle of the road. Those are teams you have to beat at home if you're going to be successful in the SEC. And Oklahoma was not even close, not even remotely competitive in this game.
Yeah, we thought that the Red River rivalry a week earlier was rock bottom, but there was another layer below that.
They keep going lower somehow.
Yeah. The ground just keeps, the foundation isn't sturdy. It's just keeps falling off. But it's just baffling. I mean, I pointed out in my game story afterwards, like, this game ended shortly after 3 p.m. on the scoreboard. For all intents and purposes, that game ended at noon. 3 turnovers in the span of 9 offensive plays. 2 of them returned for touchdowns. All 3 of them led to South Carolina touchdowns. It was 21-0 less than 6 minutes into this game. Michael Hawkins gets pulled. Jackson Arnold back in. I think 3 minutes into the second quarter, it was 24-0. And, after that, it's like, the defense, when they didn't, have a short field or, really, not even be on the field. And, when you're talking about, South Carolina's defense getting touchdowns, the rest of the game, it was relatively close. Like, the defense played well enough for Oklahoma to be able to win that game. But when you are gift wrapping 21, 24 points that soon, you're giving no chance at survival. And, changes came. As we kind of anticipated they would. I think Brent Venables didn't really have much of a choice after, earlier in the week saying that he's not typically inclined to make those kind of changes in season. But when you go out and lay an egg like the offense did on Saturday, you have to do something. And you can kind of hear it in his voice after the game. It's like, nobody expected that to happen on Saturday. They felt pretty good about the game plan, but the execution, as has been the case throughout the season, just wasn't there.
Yeah, I mean, that says it all. I mean, OU has made so many changes this season, whether that's on the offensive line, the quarterback, the receiving group that's out there, doing everything they can to get this offense, humming. And just to an average offense, do something to score points. And it just never happened. And so at the end of it, it's like, all right, now it's time to make the change to the coaching staff. And Josh, you and I were talking about it. We were on the same boat. We were saying all these different things that maybe OU could do. And then we were like, okay, we're at a point to where it's probably time to make a decision here, or at least at the end of the season, about a coaching staff change and things like that. And so that's what happened. I mean, just on Sunday. I mean, that's pretty much what went down. Looking back at this game, I mean, it was as bad as I remembered. I mean, at 21 points, you can't spot somebody at 21 points. When you're talking about video games, playing Madden, things like that, at 21-0, you have to pass the sticks. I mean, that was 5 minutes into the game. Like, it was rough. I mean, it's a reason that it's that way. It's like, you can't win giving anybody 21 points, especially in the SEC. It just won't happen. So it was just bad. It was just bad overall.
Just a comically bad start to this game. Michael Hawkins got picked on the very first play. Next drive, the fumble, return it back. Next drive, throws a pick six. And look, we talked about it on the podcast last week. We all were kind of, I think, in agreement that if you want to keep starting Michael Hawkins, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to be ready to go to Jackson. Like he hadn't, it wasn't a secure start. Like this goes sideways, be ready to go to Jackson. And they were, but it was too late still. Even doing it 5 minutes in the game was too late. The game was over. It was 21-0 right there. They were not going to score 21 points. There was no hope of that. They didn't break double digits again. They got the end zone one time. The offensive line, guys, just a disaster. Just complete, just dumpster fire. 9 sacks, program record allowed to 9 different guys, which is appalling in its own right. Jackson Arnold, it doesn't matter who the quarterback is. I made the joke about it in the instant reaction. It could be anyone back there. You're getting sacked 9 times. It's not going to go well for you.
You said Johnny Unitas?
Still? What's that?
You said Johnny Unitas?
Yeah, I don't know why that was the first one that's in my tongue, but I was like, throw Johnny Unitas back there. It doesn't matter. It could be anyone back there. It would not matter. You're getting sacked 9 times. The offensive line, it feels like you're kind of – it can only get so much better when the O-line is struggling to the level it is. Now, South Carolina has got a really good pass rush. We talked about that coming in, so they're not going to face another team this year that has got a edge play that good. Nevertheless, they're going to face more good defensive lines. It's the SEC. They got to play another top 20 team this week. It's just so bad. It's really hard to believe, and frankly, because this is a program and an offensive line coach and Bill Beanbo that is known for producing NFL offensive linemen year after year after year. But the 5 starters left. They had to go portal hunting. They became portal reliant, and they basically missed on all the portal guys they picked up. And that's where they're at in the spot they're in now.
Yeah, it didn't I don't think it really set in for me until yesterday or, Sunday when I was, going over the game again, that the sacks came from 9 different guys. It's I was like, oh, surely Kyle Kennard or Dylan Stewart had a couple of sacks each because they were causing havoc there. But no, it was 9 different guys came up with those 9 sacks. Shane Beamer couldn't believe that it was a program record that his team had set there against Oklahoma. And I know, sacks have only been an official NCAA stat since 2000. So it's not like we're talking about 130-year history. We're talking about, a quarter century. But that's still a quarter century. Like Bill Bedenbaugh is a better coach than what he has put out on the field this season. And I know the line has, dealt with some injury issues during the offseason. So it's hard to get these guys, gelling and on the field together a lot. But I think it just shows you cannot, in this day and age, depend on the portal to rebuild an offensive line. You can supplement it. You can grab a couple pieces to try to fill some gaps there, add some, depth. But you cannot try to go out and get 4 or 5 starters on the offensive line and expect to be successful, especially in the SEC. And quite frankly, they've whiffed on this offensive line. Guys that we thought that were going to be better, Branson Hickman, he's not starting anymore. Their best transfer on the offensive line right now is a guy who is in his 2nd year in the program, and Troy Everett. He was their best guy up front. Fabechi Wiwu, he's started every game at right guard, but he's the only guy that, hasn't moved around at all. In 7 games, they've started 6 different lineups. I think they've had like a dozen or so different combinations along the offensive line. That's not how you're going to have success. They've given up the 2nd most sacks in the country this season. 9 more sacks allowed already than they gave up all of last season. It's just, when your offensive line is playing that poorly, you are not giving your offense any chance at success.
It's a line of scrimmage league, and we've been saying this all off season. It didn't matter at a certain time. We were saying the same thing. The offensive line is what worries us the most. And now we didn't think, I'm speaking for you guys, but I don't think we thought it could be this bad. You thought bringing those transfers in was going to help, because the transfers that are brought in, they're still veterans. So you're thinking, okay, maybe they can form a bond with these other guys and click pretty well. That just has not happened. And as we've seen, as more and more teams look at film of OU, the OU offensive line is just getting worse and worse and worse. Like each game, it's just getting worse. And it doesn't matter who they put in there. which is once again one of the craziest things about it. It's just not helping. And so it's scary. I think it's scary for when the position they are for the rest of this season, because we know how tough this schedule is going to be for the Sooners, and you don't have an offensive line. Now you got a quarterback. Either you don't know which quarterback's going to go in there, although we all think it's Jackson at this point in time. But those quarterbacks have to worry about that as well. They don't have protection to even run the offense they want to run. So it's like it's crazy. It's crazy right now. It's a very worrisome time for the offensive line. And you spoke on it, like Spencer Brown was back in there. I mean, we thought he didn't look very good early in the season, and he's a guy you got to rely on in that game. So it's rough, man. It's rough right now.
Yeah, I think it's kind of crazy. Like, I don't think we thought that all 5 of the portal additions were going to be like game changers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we were all pretty high on Fabechi Wiwu. We thought that Branson Hickman was a second portal window steal, but I don't know whether it's just like he hasn't fully recovered from that ankle injury on the first game of the season, or for whatever reason, he has not been the same player he was at SMU that he has been here. And I know he's playing a lot stiffer competition every game going against those defensive tackles in the SEC. But Garen Hatchett's a guy that we thought was going to be a little bit better, but he's been out since early in the season. He's out for the year, and like you said, Spencer Brown struggled in the spring. We didn't really think that he was going to be a starter.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Tarquin's been probably their most consistent of the 5 pickups, and even he has not been great. And they've had to move him around. They moved him. He didn't even start this last game, but they quickly had to reinsert him back at left tackle. And then by the end of the game, he's at right tackle because they switched things around again. You just can't do that. You need to develop from within and get these guys. Jacob Sexton needs to play to the level that they thought he can. Jake Taylor needs to play to the level that they thought he can. At some point this season, are we going to see some of these, other underclassmen who, we think can be good offensive linemen, whether it's a Eugene Brooks or a Eddie Pierre-Louis? I know Heath Ozaitis played more, Logan Howland's played more, but at some point you have to start thinking about the future and see what you have so that you can fully assess what you have moving forward.
100%. It's amazing it got to this point, and I'll get it on the record now. For me, Bill Bedenbaugh, I think, is a really good coach, and I do personally, just my opinion, think moving on from him would be a misstep because he has the track record. The recruiting class they have coming in on the offensive line is stacked beyond belief. And I really like the young guys they have. EPL, Brooks, like Tom said, Daniel Akinkunmi. I think it can turn around pretty quick, even next season. Like in the next couple of years, I think they can get right back to what OU fans were used to. But there's no denying this year, just a complete failure all around. Portal evaluations, just the fact that we're even in the spot where you were reliant on the portal in the first place. I mean, all of this, it just, again, complete failure in that unit. And that's a big part of why OU is where they are right now offensively, because you can't do anything without an offensive line.
Yeah. Right. They're bringing in talent, as you said, like the next class coming in. It's some talented players in that class that OU is going to be relying on, I think, pretty early, trying to like some really good guys. So we'll just see what happens. I mean, you spoke about those young guys, EPL, Josh Ososha maybe even being thrown out there at a certain point, a guy from Emmett Santa Fe out here. So we'll see what happens with them. But yeah,
for sure. Obviously, no run game still. That's not going to change. Why would it? Javonte Barnes doing the best he can. I feel like he's, one of the few. I don't want to imply the guys are giving up or anything, but Javonte Barnes is one of those guys out there who clearly is giving it everything he can to try and turn it around. It's just kind of is what it is for that. Taylor Tatum continues to have little bursts here and there. The receiver room is the receiver room. I mean, Brandon Thompson finally got loose for one. That was nice to see because he's gotten deep a few times and nobody's able to get him the football. They finally connected on one in this game. The tight end room is just in shambles still. Bauer Sharp, not his best day. Had a couple of drops. And to be fair to Bauer, putting him in one-on-one situations against those defensive ends is just coaching malpractice in the first place. But he got his lunch eaten a couple times, as you would expect.
Yeah, especially against a potential future first rounder like Dylan Stewart. Like
that is schematically
former quarterback,
not the wisest.
Former quarterback.
And so, there's just nothing positive offensively at all. And that's why Seth Littrell was like, we'll talk about that more in a second. Real quick, I think we're probably all in agreement, but just to get on the record, Jackson Arnold moving forward. I mean, I thought he did the best he could have given the situation, took care of the ball, had some nice throws. Feel like you got to roll with Arnold, right?
Yeah, you have to. If you burned his red shirt, he was solid in there. I mean, his completion percentage was only 50%, but receivers also dropped 6 passes. So
Yeah.
it was better than the numbers looked, especially behind that offensive line, taking 8 sacks. But he fumbled it, but recovered it. Didn't throw any interceptions this time. Had the deep ball finally. I think he gives you your best chance. I think Mike Hawkins is going to be a good quarterback. He clearly showed some things earlier this season, but with the direction that this team is in right now, and just the situation, you need to roll with Jackson Arnold. You can't keep switching quarterbacks. You need to make a decision and roll with one guy the rest of the year, barring, injury or just absolute catastrophe, because it can't get much worse. So just roll with one of them and figure out, what you have and try to be able to keep one of them going into next season if you can. And I think Jackson Arnold needs to be that guy right now. He's obviously, got the talent. He's got the pedigree. We've talked about that. He sounded when we talked to him after the game, like he was very mature in how he handled his benching.
Yeah.
Which, you don't see a lot. He did a lot of reflecting. I wrote that story after the Tennessee game when he got benched. It's like, historically, if a 5-star quarterback gets benched at a school, they don't often get a second chance at that program. Jackson Arnold is one of the rare ones that is getting a second chance, and he seems eager to seize it. And especially with, moving on with Joe John Finley as the play caller right now, a guy who is more familiar with the veer and shoot offense that they were running with Jeff Lebby, which is what they recruited Jackson Arnold to run. I think the combination, look, you're not going to make wholesale changes to the offensive scheme, but you're going to run some more stuff that Jackson Arnold is more inclined to be comfortable with. And I just think that he gives them their best chance at being successful at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I was on record saying that I thought Michael Hawkins was the best guy for this offense because the offensive line was so bad. Get somebody that's more shifty out there and things like that. And he was taking care of the ball. But once you go back to doing what Jackson Arnold was doing against Tennessee, having those 3 turnovers, it's like, put Jackson Arnold back in. Let's get him out there. And I thought, for what it's worth, Jackson Arnold played a great game given the circumstances that he was given, like being thrown in there and handling that, throwing for over 200 yards. You got to shout something like that out. I mean, he handled it really well. And like you said, you got to go with him going forward because of that. That red shirt is an issue as well, because that's 2 seasons in a row now that Oklahoma has burned his red shirt in years that you didn't think you had to. Well, this year you would have had to, but you look at all the things that Yeah. So, I mean, having him out there was great for OU. I think that deep ball to Brendan Thompson, which is something that we saw in the bowl game, we thought that's going to be a big connection for them, one of the best weapons they have going forward, and we finally got to see it again there. And so that was good to see. I mean, just having a guy back there that was able to handle that, because he got sacked 8 times. Of those 9 sacks, 8 of those was against him. Like, he dealt with a lot of pressure, dealt with a lot of adversity in that game, because he knows fans may not like him so much at that time because they had already booed that he came back out there in the Tennessee game is for one drive at one point at a certain time. So it's just like you have all that against you. The way he handled himself and all of that, it was pretty remarkable what he did. So really, shout out to him, man. Yeah, he proved us wrong here, especially in the last game.
Yeah, give Jackson a lot of credit, staying with it, staying ready. Modern Culture Bowl would have been really easy to shut it down, save the red shirt, look for his next stop. But he told, the staff, look, don't throw me into garbage time. But if you're going to use me in a real game, we'll burn that red shirt and we'll roll with it.
Yeah.
I think completely you got to stick with Jackson the rest of the season and then figure out where you go from there. But yeah, I mean, credit to him. I've talked about it before. Every single game, I guess it's only been 2 games, Auburn and Texas, but Jackson was still, as he has always done, 2 hours before kick, hour and a half out there doing his same warm-ups. He's done everything the same as if he was still starting. And so that's a credit to him being mature about it and, staying ready. And now here you go. You get that second chance, like Tom said, which doesn't happen all the time. And so we'll see what he makes of it, the rest of the way.
Yeah. I just want to point out, like we mentioned, he took the 8 sacks. The offensive line kind of is what it is. But when he was able to work from a clean pocket, he was 16 of 28 for 223 yards and a touchdown, and he had a couple of those passes were dropped. Mm-hmm. So when he's had the time and has not had to, move the pocket or evade pressure, he was pretty good in this game. So I think that gives you a glimmer of hope that, if you roll with him, you might be able to conjure up something offensively.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be a complete turnaround, but again, it cannot get much worse than it has been.
Yeah, and I'm not sure like how fast can you cure the yips in football? Like it happened for Michael Hawkins. I think he was going to have that going back in there with those 3 turnovers. You're going to feel timid doing anything. Now Jackson Arnold, I guess, had that against Tennessee, but he looked great in this one. So like, how fast is he cured from that? Like, is that really like, is he really confident in himself now going forward, running that offense? That's the biggest thing. He looked the part against South Carolina. I think so.
Only other thing I had offensively, Jacob Jordan. Hello. How you doing? Preferred walk-on true freshman wideout, gets tossed out there, has one of Oklahoma's best games of the year from a wideout. 6 catches for 86 yards. Gave him a spark there. I think, without question, he has to continue to play and get a lot of snaps and targets. That seems like a no-brainer. I do think Deion Burks is probably, Deion Burks was out there in warm-ups, and he looked great. He was in full uniform. They were upgrading him to a game-time decision. I was told from a team source he didn't start practicing until pretty late in the week. Thursday was when he really started to kind of finally get out there. So it still felt unlikely he would play, and then, of course, he didn't. I would think that suggests that he's probably close. Who knows? That's scary, I guess, to speculate. But Jacob Jordan gave them a lift for a while, so shout out to him. Maybe a viable option moving forward. But he was the only other thing I had offensively. But, yeah, overall, not great. Again,
yeah, we saw Deshaun McCullough in like the same situation. He like went out there and warmed up with the team for a game before he got back out there. I believe it was a game before. So maybe that's the same thing for Deion.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like Jacob Jordan, like shout out to him, like a true freshman walk-on coming in a tough situation, and really was outside of Deion Burks' 3 touchdown performance in the opener, it's arguably the best performance from a receiver this season. He tied JJ Hester for the single game season high.
I know, crazy.
3 of his 6 receptions went for first downs. Obviously showed some stuff like, we've talked about before that, the offensive line, like they really miss those guys, and they miss Dylan Gabriel, but it feels like what this offense like has really, really been missing is a Drake Stoops like guy who can just like run a quick, crisp route and get open. And Jacob Jordan kind of showed flashes of that. I'm curious because I think he has earned more playing time. I'm curious if when Deion Brooks returns, if we see Deion Brooks more at outside receiver so that they can run Jacob Jordan in the slot a little bit more and get both those guys on the field. I know that doesn't give you a lot of size at 2 of the 3 receiver spots.
Yeah.
But it gives you some guys that can make plays.
Yeah. You like put them in where JJ Hester's at or Brennan Thompson? What do you think? I think more JJ Hester if you put him on the outside, right?
Well, you put Deion Burks on one of the outside spots.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Outside receivers. I'm not sure look, Deion Burks played a lot of outside receiver at Purdue last year. Did more of that than he did slot. So it's not like you're asking him to do something completely new. It's just not something that he's done as much of this season when he's been healthy.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. I was just asking if you knew where you had an idea of which one he would replace, but yeah, no biggie. Yeah.
I think you like to have some size in there with JJ Hester, but he also had 3 drops in this game, which is not great. Brennan Thompson is obviously your best deep threat guy right now. So maybe you roll with a kind of an undersized one. I still think you're going to rotate in guys like JJ Hester and some of those younger receivers too. But I would not be surprised if we saw either a combination of Brennan Thompson, Deion Burks, and Jacob Jordan, or Deion Burks, Jacob Jordan, and JJ Hester at some point moving forward.
It's crazy. It's crazy that the conversation is being had. Going into the season, it was like, OU has their guys, man. And now the walk-on, Jacob Jordan is out there being the guy that you're really talking about. Now, granted for him, he wasn't necessarily just a walk-on. He had, P5, P4 offers elsewhere, but he just chose to come to Oklahoma and be a part of it. So, it was good to see him go out there in his second appearance and make those type of plays. It was phenomenal what he did, being a reliable target for Jackson Arnold in that game. So, shout out to him again.
For sure. I think he's got to be an option. You mentioned the drops for JJ Hester. One of the catches was also a drop. He dropped it and then caught it. Yeah. Afterward, he had 4 catches on 11 targets. And that's not all on him, but not exactly a ratio you like there. But yeah, offense was awful, and we'll talk about the coordinator change in just a second. Real quick, though, to wrap up this game. Defensively, my only real takeaway defensively is just what a shame it is that Oklahoma's completely just wasting this defense. This was the most extreme example maybe of the entire year. because of the 2 defensive touchdowns, like literally not even allowing them the opportunity to play defense. They only gave up 1 real drive in this entire game, and South Carolina scored 35. It was right before half. The middle 8 continues to be awful. It's bizarre. Right before half has been a weak spot.
And that touchdown drive, like they jumped off sides on like 4th down to extend the drive too. So it's like they were really close to getting off the field there.
Beyond egregious. Yeah.
The stat that was like really like condemning of this offense really, and telling of like how well the defense has been. You know, when it was 24-0, it was, you know, when Oklahoma's defense was on the field, they were getting outscored 10-0. When the offense was on the field, they were getting outscored 14-0, which is just insane.
Ouch.
But I mean, like, again, you take away the short fields and the defensive touchdowns for South Carolina, and I know that changes the complexion of the game and everything that happens after that. But the defense really stepped up, held them just 11 points the rest of the day, the 1 touchdown, a short field goal. Second half only gave up like 65, 67 total yards. Like the defense hasn't been the issue, and like credit to these guys for like still sticking with it, because it would be very easy to get just like frustrated with how bad the offense has been and just like give up. But like listening to the players and listening to Zach Alley after the game, it's like, yeah, we should have forced more turnovers. Like, yeah, we got them to fumble a couple times, but we didn't come up with any of them.
Right.
Like, it's on us. It's on us. Like, you have to create your own luck sometimes. Yeah. And that's how the defense kind of feels. It's like, if we, we didn't get a takeaway, we're not doing enough to win a game. And this is the first game all season that they didn't force a turnover defensively. But they still got after the quarterback. They got 6 sacks. Somehow they had a better pass rushing like efficiency grade than South Carolina did. And South Carolina had 9 sacks. It's wild. Like, for as bad as Oklahoma's offensive line has been this season, South Carolina statistically has had a worse offensive line, which tells you something. But South Carolina still found a way to win games.
Wow, yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, like that's what I was gonna say. I mean, I spoke with Danny Stutzman and RSJ after the game, and that was pretty much their sentiment. They were like, they liked the way the defense had played, but they were surprised that they didn't get any turnovers. I mean, South Carolina was a turnover-prone team, statistically going into that game, and OU was one of the best at turning the ball over, and they couldn't get one. You would think that would help out in when you're down 21-0, early on in the game. Getting a turnover would try to bring things back and for them, and they just couldn't do it. So that was one of the things they were actually disappointed about. But I think overall they liked the way they played defensively. I mean, we talked about it being a very low-scoring, close game going into it, and it would have been that if they didn't give up those 21 points at the beginning of the game. I mean, it's crazy the way that, like you said, Josh, they're wasting this defensive talent right now. Like it's bad.
Yeah, they didn't even give them. And Brett Venables said it. They didn't even give themselves a chance in this game with the early turnovers, and the fake punt was beyond horrible. I talked about that in the instant reaction. I hated that. On your own 30-yard line, even if you get it, you got to get 3-4 more first downs at least to even think about a field goal. I didn't understand that at all, and that put them in a disadvantageous spot. I mean, it was 24-0, and South Carolina hadn't driven the ball. Yeah, they started inside Oklahoma's territory a couple times and capitalized with points, and then the 2 defensive touchdowns. The game was over, and the defense hadn't really even had a say in it. So it is what it is. This defense is really good, and we kind of we've been saying all year, if the offense could just at least take care of the ball, put a couple scores on the board, they're going to have a chance to win, and they're not able to do that right now at all.
Yeah,
and that leads
defenses are so much better than they're getting right now.
Oh, I mean, and you feel bad for Danny Stutzman, Billy Bowman, Ethan Downs. This is their last season. They, a couple instances, especially in Danny's case, didn't need to come back, and they came back for this ride to the SEC, and they just deserve better.
Danny was asked though, he was like, it's tough even. Somebody asked him, was like, it's tough that you even came back. You couldn't expect it to be like this, right? He was like, I mean, yeah, but I mean, I wanted to come back for Oklahoma, though. I wanted to come back and finish my career here. So that was the biggest thing for him in that situation, because obviously ending last year would have been really great with the Texas win and things like that. And the way they ended that season would have been a lot better to the end of his career than the way it's going right now.
16 tackles again for Danny. He's everywhere. So that all takes us, to obviously Seth Littrell. He's done as Oklahoma's OC. We did the instant reaction show yesterday, so I recommend everybody go watch that. We pulled it all apart. We dove in all the angles of it. But to kind of clean it up, since we recorded that and did that on Sunday, Oklahoma made the announcement official. So Seth Littrell is fired. He's done. Just 7 games as Oklahoma's, primary play caller, co-OC 8 if you want to include the Alamo Bowl last year when he was the intern. Joe John Finley is going to take over calling plays. Kevin Johns is going to be promoted to co-OC to fill that spot, and he's going to coach quarterbacks. So that's the moves here. I'm sure OU fans feel a certain kind of way about Joe John Finley now taking over as the play caller. Colin did a great job bringing it up yesterday in instant reaction. He's going to run an offense that's a little more similar to what Jeff Lebby was, doing before, and is what Jackson Arnold is more comfortable with, going back to his high school days. We'll see if that makes a difference, with 5 games to go. But guys, we talked about it yesterday, but it felt like that had to happen. Oklahoma, no matter how you slice it, one of the worst offenses in college football. 107th in scoring and 128th in total offense. That's going to get you fired. I think they're worse. I saw this stat yesterday on CBS HQ. I think they're either worst or second to worst in passing yards per game, rushing yards per game, scoring, like any stat you can think of. They're either dead last or second to last in the SEC. Mm-hmm. So, it was a no-choice situation here for Brent Venables. They had to make the move, and we'll see how Joe John Finley now does the rest of the way.
Yeah, I'll run down a few of those stats real quick. Against Power 4 opponents, they're averaging 14 points per game, which I believe is the second or third worst among Power 4 teams against similar competition. Sure. 116th in passing offense, 122nd in pass efficiency offense, 124th in yards per rush attempt, 128th in third down efficiency, 133rd in both sacks allowed and 20-yard plays produced. So second to last. Mm-hmm. 132nd in yards per play offensively. It's bad. 34%. 34% of their 90 possessions this season have ended in either a 3-and-out or a turnover that happened within the first 3 plays of a drive.
That was the worst.
You are wasting a third of your possessions. It's bad. Very, very bad. Mm-hmm. And look, something needed to happen. Even it very much seems like this is not something that Brent Venables wanted to do a week ago. He had some hope. He's never been a part of a staff that has had to make a midseason change like this. But they gave him no choice. What they put on the field on Saturday at a place like Oklahoma is unacceptable. And to do that in back-to-back weeks against Texas and then South Carolina, something needed to happen. And again, I talked about it on our reaction show yesterday, but listening to Seth Littrell talk after the game, look, to his credit, he has taken ownership for the offensive shortcomings. It is not all on him. It is a very nuanced situation with a lot of variables that have, made the situation what it was. He was dealt a bad hand with the injuries to wide receiver. It's not all on him that the offensive line hasn't been great, and what he inherited up front there. It's a tough situation. He sounded like he was on his last legs. I thought it was very, kind of foreboding and ominous that when he walked into the post-game presser, he's usually wearing a suit. He was still in his, Oklahoma hoodie and, track pants after the game. This looked like a man who was defeated and knew he was on borrowed time. It was sudden but not unexpected, and they had to do that. It almost feels like, I know how a lot of fans feel about Joe John Finley. His position group has not been great. He doesn't really have experience as a play caller. It almost feels like you're shuffling the deck chairs on the Titanic at this point. But you hope, like you said, that with his kind of background, with the veer and shoot, stuff that Jackson Arnold is a little bit more comfortable with, maybe you can find some sort of spark. But I still think that the expectations for this offense moving forward aren't that high. Mm-hmm. It kind of is what it is. 7 games this season.
Yeah,
sure.
It's tough because they didn't have the ability to even scheme guys open. It seems like under Seth Littrell's offense, they weren't able to do it. It was like you knew there were two plays that Oklahoma could run and for sure get, a first down with. It was the corner route to either Farouk running that, or I couldn't remember who ran it or later on, but it was like a corner route that they ran that got them open, and it was like the tight end slant or mini post in the middle of the field, which Michael Hawkins threw very well throughout his time as the Oklahoma quarterback. Like those two plays were like the two you knew Oklahoma could get a first down on. Other than that, it was nothing else. Like there was no other guys being schemed open that you could see. It was really just like three guys running around out there in the wide receiver position. Like it didn't make any sense. So Josh and I were talking about it. I mean, we've said it, like these guys will still be good on other, like, Power 4 schools. Like they have the ability to make plays. And I just don't think they were given the opportunity to do so at this point in time. Like that's the way I have to see it now, because it just was never working. It just never was. And so that's the only way I can look at it. I mean, I have to go back and look at more film. I mean, but it does not seem like guys are open regardless. And that's why Michael Hawkins was holding the ball as long as he was. And Jackson Arnold was trying to make, those plays that he was trying to force the ball into places that it wasn't really there. It's like, they're just not there. So, I mean, that's the way I look at it now. It's unfortunate for Seth Littrell because this was a dream job for him. He wanted to be here. He had worked many years to get back to this place after, being the captain and helping lead that team to the national championships, things like that. So it's just unfortunate for him for sure. But he knows the standard. He knows what has to be at Oklahoma, and he wasn't delivering that. So I think parting ways is the best for everybody in this situation.
Yeah, and I want to clarify, like, Seth Littrell is not blameless in all this.
Mm-hmm.
But It was a tough situation that he had to try to figure out, and they paid him the big bucks to try to figure it out, and it was not working. Like, he was not able to scheme this offense to a point where it can even be respectable. Not even average, but like below average or respectable. Like, you need to do something. You had to rip the bandage off. Brent Venables made the decision, and now, like we discussed yesterday, he's facing a decision that will define his tenure as Oklahoma's coach. For better or for worse, this next hire that he makes will be the most important hire that he makes in his career.
For sure. Got to nail it. No doubt about that. Yeah, I agree with everything you guys said. I mean, I feel for Seth as well. Good guy. As an OU legacy, played here, all that stuff, he was really excited about this opportunity, and it just didn't work out. I think the fair way to put it, he was definitely dealt a bad hand the offensive line is what it is. All the receivers are hurt.
Yep.
You have a young quarterback. You're going into the SEC, the toughest schedule he's had in years. But he also played that hand horrifically. I think those are both fair to say. The offense is awful. So it was a tough spot to be in, but you also still expect more than what they've gotten at the same time. And again, I said it on the instant reaction. I liked the hire at the time. It was a safe hire. So you do have that. And I know some fans don't always like the safe hire, but I thought it was. I liked the consistency of the relationship with Jackson Arnold. Seth had a good, pass. I mean, his offenses in North Texas were really good. He called a pretty darn good game in the Alamo Bowl. I didn't mind it. I didn't, but it didn't work. And Brent Venables had to make this change, and we'll see. And like Tom said, the next hire is going to be a big one. And we're going to talk a lot about that over the next several weeks, different, than when Jeff Lebby left. That was obviously in the off season. This is the middle of the year. So you have the rest of this season to figure out what you want. And then at the end of the year to go get them. And we already have a hot board up. Tom Green and Colin Kennedy both did a good job collaborating on that to get a list of candidates. It's a wide net to start. It's 1.0, version 1.0. We have a month and a half of season left to still fine tune it. But for our VIP members, so there's some initial names that we think make sense, both from, knowing the program, connections, all that stuff. It's a lot of stuff baked into what makes sense. So there's some early candidates already there for VIP members. That's going to continue to get refined, names added, dropped. It'll be fluid as we go along throughout the rest of this season. But like Tom said, a huge, huge hire for Oklahoma coming up. They have to nail it, to get this thing going back in the right direction.
And Josh, I think you mentioned it like off camera. Like one of the trickiest things about having to make this type of hires, most OCs, like, the big time ones, are going to want their own staff. Like, it plays a part into it. Like the positional coaches, there could be changes there as well, because they're going to want their own guys to come in and run things the way they want to run them. So it's a tricky situation to be in for Brent Venables and Joe Castiglione and those guys trying to figure out what to do next. If obviously they don't go forward with Joe John Finley as calling the plays here. Like it's it's tricky here.
Yeah, like you said, there's a lot of time between now and the season finale on November 30th. Brent Venables is going to have to do a lot of vetting, a lot of back channel kind of discussions, because a lot of these guys all of these guys are working right now. You want to have someone in place shortly after the regular season ends, because signing day is 4 days later. The transfer portal opens up on December 9th.
Mm-hmm.
You do not have a lot of time to sell these kids on who is going to be calling the offense and running the show there. You don't know if the rest of this offensive staff is still going to be here at that time. You're going to have to try real hard to keep everything together, both from a recruiting perspective, like we talked about with Colin yesterday, and just your own roster retention and assessing what you need in the portal. So Brent Venables has his work cut out for him these next several weeks. It's going to be interesting. I think, personally, I think we all agree that this hire needs to come from outside of the program, but it would be a disservice to not say that, these next 5 games are going to be a audition of sorts for Joe John Finley. But unless some miraculous turnaround happens and they're putting up 40 points per game over these next 5 weeks against some of these defenses they're facing, I would not anticipate him to be the offense coordinator in 2025. It might be that he's even auditioning for his next job, whatever the situation might be for Oklahoma's offensive staff after this season. But I'm curious to see how things look these next 5 weeks. But I would definitely expect Brent Venables to look outside, leave no stone unturned, look at some up-and-coming G5 coordinators that have generated a lot of buzz in recent years, guys that have good play calling experience. He's going to look at some, sitting Power 4 offensive coordinators, surely, guys that he has connections with from his coaching career, whether it was, overlapping together at Clemson, or just guys that know the guys that he coached with at Clemson or at other points in his career. Like, you need to cast a wide net and make sure you nail this. Like Brent Venables has said several times that he likes to bet on people. Well, he needs to hit the jackpot.
100%. The only 2 situations, at least in recent OU history to compare it to, went 2 very different ways. Because the first one, which we talked about before, Bob Stoops firing Josh Heupel, making that hard decision, worked out great. Hired Lincoln Riley. The offenses were amazing, a million Heisman, and all of that. The other one, Mike Stoops in the middle of the season, had to happen. Same kind of thing. Ruffin McNeil was the interim the rest of the year. They hired Alex Grinch. That didn't work out so great. So we'll see if this next hire is more of a hiring Lincoln to coach your offense or hiring Alex Grinch to coach your defense type of hire. We'll see. It's a big one, though, obviously. And it will determine this iteration of Oklahoma football, and the Brent Venables era will largely be defined, like Thomas said, by how this goes. And we'll see how it goes. We have a lot of time to talk about it. I think that's it for now. The schedule a bit different this week. No player interviews tonight. They bumped those to Tuesday to be after the Brent Venables presser. Pretty logical move there with the offensive coordinator change. So we're going to have Brent Venables tomorrow for his presser, same time as always. Then player interviews in the evening on Tuesday. So keep an eye out for that. Then we'll have the podcast again, of course, on Thursday. Colin's going to be back on. Very curious to get some more recruiting reaction from all of this. That'll be on the Thursday show. We'll have the game preview for OU Ole Miss on Friday. Oh, by the way, in the midst of all of this, you got to go play a top 20 team on the road on Saturday. So we'll talk about that on Friday as well. Great show. A lot to talk about there and more to come. That's it for now, though. Tom Green, James D. Jackson. I'm Josh Callaway signing off for now. We'll see you next time right back here on the Sooners Illustrated podcast.
See you.